Roquan Smith loves to trash talk, and he was at it again, taking some spicy shots at Jayden Daniels ahead of the Baltimore Ravens Week 6 matchup with the Washington Commanders. We talk about that. More comparisons between Lamar Jackson and Jayden Daniels come to the surface, and so much more coming up next here on this Friday edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Allstriker of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much, as always, for being here and making Locked On Ravens both a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. Free and available on all podcasting platforms. So in video form on YouTube, you can like and subscribe to the channel. In audio form, you can follow along and subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcasts for 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We are back here. Our Purple Friday guest is Sam Njoku of the Ravens Talk podcast. And Sam, I'm somebody who I think over the course of that Ravens and Bengals game in week 5 experienced emotions and combined different emotions that I had never felt before. 41-38. I'm not sure. It's been almost a whole week. I'm not sure I'm fully recovered yet.
Yeah, and I want to blame you. It was a roller coaster. Roller coasters. If you're a Ravens fan, I mean, we talked about it last week on the show. I mean, the Bengals defense definitely didn't leave a lot to be desired as far as what they were able to do. So I was pretty confident the Ravens were able to put up points. I did not expect 41 points, but I expected them to be able to get some things done on offense. But on the defensive side, it was definitely a little more of the same, but understandable when you look at the context of the situation, how the Bengals were able to get that done. So great job by both quarterbacks, great job by both OCs, and I'm sure the defensive coordinators lost a little bit of sleep that night.
Yeah, you know, we talk about AFC North football, Sam, and it's like those 13-9 Ravens Steelers slugfests, like defensive battle the whole way. This was just a complete 180, turning AFC North football on its head. You mentioned it. Heck of a job by both Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow in this game. It was an epic quarterback battle for the ages, and I'm just so happy that it ended up in a Ravens win, because you hate to look back on games like that and losses, and you're just like, such a good game, so many great moments, but you can't watch it because, like, it's like in that AFC Championship game, Lamar had that, self pass to himself, and nobody talks about it because the Ravens lost that game. Nobody watches it because the Ravens lost that game. That Isaiah Likely play, you had to have that happen in a win. It could not happen in a loss. I would not have allowed it. And luckily, the special teams gods for the Bengals did not allow it either. And Baltimore comes out with a victory. Before we get into what Roquan Smith said and all of the Ravens Commanders talk that we're going to get to, a jam-packed show today. Let's start with that Ravens and Bengals game. Just your thoughts on it, because offensively, you saw everything you wanted to see. Guys stepping up. Blocking was, I'd say, pretty good this entire game for the most part. The running game, even though it wasn't a huge factor throughout, Derrick Henry got going in that overtime period with fresh legs. You saw Rashad Bateman step up. Zay Flowers had over 100 yards. Charlie Kohler getting in on the action. But then you look on the flip side, defensively, it was miscommunications in the secondary, breakdowns. Jamar Chase goes for almost 200 on a defense. I don't care how bad your defense is or, what you're going through. A receiver going for almost 200 on you, if you reach that threshold, there's something going on. And this is not the first time Jamar Chase has even gotten in that threshold. He went for over 200 against Baltimore a couple of years ago. So what are your overall thoughts from that game, and what did you take away from it?
Well, on the offensive side, I learned that the Ravens are just borderline unbeatable right now. I mean, they're just firing all cylinders. They can kill you with the run, and it seems as though Lamar Jackson has taken another step in his evolution as a passer, and he is being deadly throwing the football. I mean, he is distributing the ball equally. We talk about how Mark Andrews has struggled a little bit as far as statistics, but that's just because Lamar's not just looking at Mark Andrews anymore. He has weapons. He's gaining rapport with these guys. Even Rashad Bateman on this touchdown pass, a guy who has, had a little bit of difficulty getting connection with his quarterback. He's starting to get things going. So Lamar doesn't have one guy that throws you the ball to anymore, and he's been able to wheel and deal and take advantage of what the defense is giving him. So on the offensive side, loved what I saw. Obviously, the Bengals are one of the worst defenses in the league, so don't expect them to score 41 points against the Steelers. But seeing them get the job done, keep pace with Joe Burrow is just very, very good to see, especially come the postseason when you're going to be dealing with these top-tier quarterbacks, the likes of Patrick Mahomes, the likes of Josh Allen, both who the Ravens have already played this season. So very good to see what the offense was able to do. On the defensive side, it's a little different. I don't feel as bad about the about the Ravens defense in the Bengals game as opposed to even the Raiders game. I think that the Ravens game plan was simply do not allow Joe Burrow to beat you. And Joe Burrow almost beat him. I mean, it looked like the game plan was to keep guys 5, 10, 15 yards away from the receiver and not allow him to get you beat deep. There were a couple of instances where Joe Burrow was able to take advantage of maybe some indecision by the safety group, mainly Marcus Williams on that huge post route that went across the field to Jamar Chase for the touchdown. But all in all, it looks like the Ravens game plan was, we're going to be giving up some points here, going to give us some yards here, but let's not get beat. They did get beat in the red zone. I think that was the difference for the Ravens, but I think the game plan going in was just that. And John Harbaugh mentioned it. They did allow a lot of tightly contested catches to be made. That's just great play by T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and not really an indictment on the Ravens defense. I do want to see them improve. I don't think you can do this for 17 games and expect to be successful in the postseason. So I expect them to get better as the season progresses. We've seen Ravens take some avenues in order to improve their defensive coaching staff, and I think we'll probably touch on that a little bit later. But for the most part, I think that the defense did what they thought they had to do. I just didn't think they expected Joe Burrow to be as successful.
Yeah, and they're going to have to get better in a hurry here, at least put up a better performance in a hurry, because Jayden Daniels, the stud rookie quarterback for the Commanders, is coming to town. But that is not stopping Roquan Smith from talking all types of trash. And we know, Sam, this is who Roquan Smith is, right? This is not shocking to me. But Roquan, I thought he played a lot better in that Cincinnati game, all things considered. I know it was a bit of a struggle for him to start the season, but Roquan with a couple of spicy shots, I guess I'll call them, at Jayden Daniels. And look, he said, as a defense, said we give things that other teams across the league don't give in terms of the Ravens defense. So he said Jayden Daniels hasn't seen a defense like ours, and talked about how, hey, look, at the end of the day, he's still a rookie. And did give him respect, right? I'm not saying that Roquan was out here openly talking all this trash to Jayden Daniels and didn't show him any respect. But, man, to hear Roquan, I think it's a little different this time around because, as we just mentioned, Baltimore's defense has been struggling in certain areas a little bit. So, obviously, the run defense has been phenomenal the whole year. Nothing has changed there. But to hear, he hasn't seen a defense like ours, and he's still a rookie. I felt like that stuff was like, that's hitting last year. Like, whenever that, it's like, yeah, you know what's up. But this year is kind of like, hold, let's pump the brakes for a second. What do you kind of make of what Roquan said here? Some trash, but then obviously some respect at the end.
Yeah, and I appreciate a little bit of banter. I remember when I was covering the Ravens early on, I would do a little piece about the rivalry between the Ravens and Steelers and how there was trash talk between the owners, head coaches, players. So I'm all about the trash talk a little bit. So, and I understand where Roquan's coming from. I mean, think about it. Other than Gardner Minshew, the Ravens have played Patrick Mahomes, Dak Prescott, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, and now they're playing a Jayden Daniels led team. So they've had some quarterbacks that they had to go up against, some guys that may be feared in some regards throughout the league. And to his point as well, the Ravens do play a very complex style of defense. Very basic in their alignment, but they play cover 1, cover 3, cover 4, and cover 6, a multitude of ways, and they're very even in their distribution. So Jayden Daniels is not going to be reading too high safety throughout the game. He's going to be receiving different looks, and they're going to be doing things pressure-wise to kind of create some doubt in his eyes before he throws that ball. So Roquan has a point. But as you mentioned, the Ravens are 30th in pass defense. They're not doing that great. And so as a fan, you don't probably want to hear that from Roquan Smith, especially after just giving up 38 points. But I appreciate it. He has a point. I mean, Jayden Daniels hasn't seen a defense like this, and he's going to need to be on his P's and Q's to get this job done.
Yeah, and there are all the stats that have been circulating in this one from Sam Njoku. You might have heard of him before. Ended up, Sam, you said this. Ravens 15-2 against rookie quarterbacks. Is that at home, right? Correct? At home in the John Harbaugh era. So, man, look, if there's one thing about this Ravens defense, whether it spans all the defensive coordinators across John Harbaugh's time, they make life difficult for these younger players that haven't seen. I'd say when Roquan Smith said that he hasn't seen a defense like theirs, I agree with you, where it's like the complexities of this defense is what he means. It's not like, we're this tough defense and, we're better than everybody and we know it and we're going to rub it in your face. Like, they have confidence in themselves. They know they're a good unit when everybody's hitting. but it's about confusing these young quarterbacks, which they have done over and over again. In the full quarter, at least one of them here from Roquan, quote, when he's in the open field, he's a dangerous guy to tackle, but we love challenges. He's still a rookie at the end of the day, and he hasn't seen a defense like ours just yet. So, look, young quarterbacks don't typically have success against this Ravens team, even if they're coming in super hot. Like we saw Justin Herbert a couple years ago had never seen this Ravens defense before. If you remember, Sam, he came into Baltimore as an MVP frontrunner. And the Ravens won that game by what, like 30 points or something. And Herbert was like horrendous. And that ended his MVP campaign. And he was probably sitting there like, man, what just happened? like he was dominating everybody. And I think that was week 6, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And here we are in week 6. And Jayden Daniels is coming to town. And look, still going to be one heck of a matchup all across the board. But obviously a lot of respect shown to Jayden as well, even from Roquan Smith. Right? Again, Roquan, I think he's very calculated in what he says. Like he tries to get in your head, but he also understands. Yeah, he knows what he's doing out there when he's talking all that trash, both on and off the field. Coming up though, one of the biggest conversation points has been, is Jayden Daniels the next coming of Lamar Jackson? Is he a baby Lamar Jackson? Well, we can pump the brakes on that. And we should be pumping the brakes on that. So be sure to stay tuned. We'll talk about what Jayden Daniels himself had to say on it, because he has some strong words, as well as players like Mark Andrews, Zach Ertz, Lamar, and a lot more. Stay tuned. Lots to get to on the show. First, the show is sponsored by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows the others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth. For any net worth, these generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. And the show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. And PrizePicks has so many things to offer. I love going on PrizePicks, seeing everything that is up and available. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25%, providing even more value for your lineups. PrizePicks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. So for this Ravens and Commanders game, if you'd like the more on Lamar Jackson passing yards, more on Jayden Daniels passing yards, PrizePicks is the place to go. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. We are back. Our second segment, Locked On Ravens, with Sam Njoku. I am Kevin Ostreicher. Sam, everybody compares. You get this dual threat quarterback in the league, and it's a young dual threat quarterback. And whoa, this guy's the next Lamar Jackson. Oh, this guy is gonna be the second coming of Lamar Jackson. In reality, you and I know, and a lot of other people do too, there is only one Lamar Jackson. And part of what these comparisons do is, one, it can place a lot of burden on a young player's shoulders and be like, oh wow, do I have to be this person? Jayden Daniels was asked about this during his media availability on Wednesday. And he was kind of like, nah, I'm good on that. Obviously gave his flowers to Lamar and obviously said a lot of good things about him, but said at the end of the day, he wants to be Jayden Daniels, not the next such and such, right? Not even limiting it to Lamar. He just wants to be his own player. We heard Zach Ertz talk about it on Wednesday, saying that, it's a disservice to both guys, right? Lamar's been in the league for a while. He's a 2-time MVP, and Jayden has a long career ahead of him, but he just doesn't have the experience Lamar does. Like, that is the facts of it all. Mark Andrews calling Lamar his GOAT. There's only one Lamar. And that's kind of been the thing. Even Lamar himself, which we'll get into in a couple of minutes, has kind of downplayed his, I guess, overall impact on the quarterback position. But I think a lot of these guys do look up to Lamar Jackson, but that doesn't mean that they are going to or should be expected to become the next version of Lamar Jackson. So I know with Jayden and Lamar, honestly, since he was drafted, even at LSU, everybody was already making that comparison. And Jayden's been hearing it forever. I'm sure Lamar has caught wind of it, and Lamar gave his flowers to Jayden as well. But where are your thoughts on who Jayden Daniels is as a player versus who Lamar Jackson is as a player right now?
Yeah, I think they play two different styles of football, in my opinion. I think the closest comparison that you could possibly have to Lamar Jackson would be Michael Vick. I mean, just the way that those two play. There hasn't been a quarterback in the league really close to what Lamar has done since he entered the league. If I had to compare Jayden Daniels to somebody, it would be along the lines of a Deshaun Watson in his prime, or even the RG3, who was a commander in his prime as well. So those are two guys more similar to Jayden Daniels than Lamar Jackson. But to that point, Jayden Daniels is doing very well in his first few starts. It's something that Lamar Jackson has under his belt as well. So the comparisons are going to be there, especially since Lamar Jackson has had success this year. He looks like the league candidate for MVP right now after the first 5 weeks. So you're going to get those comparisons. And I think the players understand that. But to their points, you want to be the first Jayden Daniels. You don't want to be the next Michael Vick, as Lamar Jackson was for all those years. I think he's pretty much shed that title with those two MVPs. But I'm sure Jayden Daniels wants to make a name for himself as well, and they'll do that. So I'm glad that the Ravens players took up for Lamar, calling him the GOAT, and after that game, who can not call him the GOAT, at least for this week? So not too much in that regard. I think that the both those quarterbacks are entitled to have their own name, and I agree with their assessment of such.
Yeah, and I think it's such, with those two guys, look, Lamar is his own player, and Jayden is his own player too. And to kind of have all these comparisons placed on them of, this guy's a dual threat quarterback, so we're automatically to just say he's Lamar Jackson, and that is what it is. Like, that's not how it should ever work. And again, you hear the comparisons coming out of college for Jayden, and you're just like, okay, all right. And look, Jayden's had you mentioned it. He's had a heck of a start to his career. I'm really impressed. One of the best things about this matchup to me, Sam, is both players are such low mistake quarterbacks. Like Jayden Daniels, for a rookie, a lot of rookie quarterbacks come in. Even Lamar had issues with fumbling his rookie season, right? Like, he had that issue. Whereas Jayden, man, he's just like, he's not turning the ball over. He's not putting the ball in turnover worthy spots. And Lamar this season, obviously, it's been a thing for, I'd say, the last few years, but this year he's been incredible not turning the ball over. And obviously he had the poor fumble at the end of the game last week, right? Again, hasn't been perfect for him, but in a matchup like this, one of the things that you can say are similar for both of these guys is they both know how to hold on to the football, hang on to it, and not put it in harm's way. Lamar being in year 7 and Jayden Daniels being a rookie, still an invaluable skill set to have no matter what year you're in the league.
Yeah, I can't believe you. Lamar Jackson's in year 7. When you mentioned it, I was like, year 7? Oh, my goodness, it is year 7 for him. So he's still young. He's still going strong. But to your point, yeah, these two guys have a long career ahead of themselves, lots of accolades to be made. But I don't think they should be compared to each other. I think Jayden Daniels is going to build his resume. But he needs to enjoy the fact that he's being compared to a great QB. And I think he understands that. But he's trying to build a legacy for himself, much like Lamar Jackson. And those two guys come to a head on Sunday.
Yep, going to be an awesome, awesome game. And I don't want to make, you feel any more of a, man, where did the time go? But Lamar Jackson saying going to be 28 in January. That's so 2 years away from 30. Man, when Lamar hits 30, I'm just going to be like, yeah, you're lying to me. Like, there's no way. And Roquan is what, 26 still?
Which is insane.
Is he 26 or did he turn 27?
I think he might have turned 27 recently. He had to have. But,
he is. Yep, 27. No, okay. 27.
Right.
So, yeah, 26 was crazy for Roquan considering he came in same draft class as Lamar. So, 2018, man, it's unbelievable kind of how time flies here. But with this game, with Jayden Daniels, like Roquan said, he is a rookie. This is going to be his 6th game. This Baltimore defense can be complex. We'll dive into this a little bit more in the final part of the show, but just as an overarching theme for you, what do you think Baltimore needs to do to make Jayden Daniels uncomfortable in this game and maybe have him hit a bit of a rookie wall in week 6?
I would say simulated pressure is probably the way to go. It's usually their MO against these rookie QBs. Let them think the pressure is coming from one way and it's actually going from another. Make a disguised man and zone coverage. Maybe you show a man too high that's actually zone cover 3. So just things like that to just make them think for that extra second post-snap to pre-snap. So if you're thinking one way and then when the ball snaps, your alignment changes just like that. I think the Ravens did something similar to that against the Joe Burrow-led Cincinnati Bengals. It obviously didn't end quite as good, but something like that along those lines, I'm sure the Ravens have put together to make sure that Jayden Daniels has a long day under center. So we'll see what the Ravens do, and Jayden Daniels will definitely earn his stripes on Sunday if he's able to get some yards, because I'm pretty sure the Ravens have something special planned for him.
Yeah, and we'll elaborate more on that in the final part of the show. But again, good early breakdown there from Sam. So be sure to stay tuned for the final part of the show so you can hear more about that. But I want to take you back, Sam, to Lamar Jackson's rookie season and kind of how he was inserted into that offense. Because I've seen a lot of, Jayden Daniels and Lamar Jackson, let's compare their rookie season so far. And like, Lamar threw his first 5 games and Jayden Daniels threw his first 5 games and all this. Well, for you, when you look at Lamar's rookie season, at least him as a starter, and you look at what Jayden Daniels has done, when you pit those two up against each other, is there anything you can even take away from that? Or do you just think there's just such different situations? You're just like, we can't even really compare them.
It's 2 different situations. I mean, definitely 2 different offenses. You know what Lamar Jackson was going through. He was, for all things considered, a gadget runner and thrower of the football his rookie season, his first few games as a starter. Jayden Daniels has been implemented into the system as a passer, and he's excelled. They do some RPO stuff to kind of get him some clean reads. So some of that is similar, but for the most part, it's 2 different styles of QB, 2 different offenses that were being put up against each other their rookie seasons. But to Lamar's credit, he worked his butt off in that offense and slowly began to gain some confidence enough to request a change in the offense. The receivers also rallied behind him to make sure that the offense was improving, because now, if you use the offense now for Lamar Jackson against Jayden Daniels, that'll probably be a more fair comparison. But the way that they played his first few games as a starter is way different from what Jayden Daniels has gone through in Washington. So I wouldn't compare it too much, but both guys are having a tremendous start to their careers for sure.
Yeah, and look, I mean, that was a Joe Flacco offense that you just throw Lamar Jackson into after the bye week once Joe hurts his hip. And you're like, all right, Lamar, go out there and run this offense that wasn't made for you. And again, when you talk about Joe Flacco at that time versus Lamar Jackson at that time, I don't think you could find 2 different players of just like what was going on. And so obviously they tried their best to adjust it as best as they could and put in certain packages. But, Washington has been able to work with Jayden Daniels throughout the offseason, get that offense ready for him. But I see on social media the comparisons of like, Jayden Daniels, compared to Lamar Jackson, this rookie season. I was like, I don't want to compare those 2 things because it's 2 entirely different situations. So Lamar is his own guy. Jayden is his own guy. And guess what? Both are really, really, really good quarterbacks. Coming up with the final part of the show, though, we'll do a deeper dive into this Ravens and Commanders matchup. Baltimore looking to move to 4-2 on the season after an 0-2 start. Stay tuned. Lots to get to here on the show. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bets for the Ravens and Commanders game. The Ravens open up as 6.5-point favorites in this game. So if you like the Ravens from the favorite perspective or the Commanders from the underdog perspective, be sure to go to FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. We're back. Locked on Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, Sam Njoku, still chopping it up with you ahead of the Ravens Week 6 matchup with the Washington Commanders. Again, be sure to like and subscribe here in video form. Follow along, subscribe in audio form for 5 days a week of daily Ravens coverage for you right here on Locked on Ravens. Now, Sam, Lamar Jackson's been incredible this season. And again, I think in the 2 losses that we saw, he was so far down on the totem pole of why the Ravens lost that game, but he's still getting punished for those losses as if he was the main reason. And I guess as what happens to quarterbacks, more so to Lamar Jackson than others, by the way. But you look at some of his stats this year, Sam, and I mean, it is just unbelievable. So among quarterbacks through week 5, Lamar Jackson, number 2 in total yards, number 2 in adjusted yards per attempt, number 3 in net yards per attempt, number 4 in passing touchdowns, number 4 in passer rating, number 5 in QBR, number 5 in yards per completion. And oh, by the way, Lamar Jackson is also top 10 in passing yards at number 9. So talk about all these MVP talks and MVP conversations. You know, at the beginning of the year, it's, oh, well, Josh Allen is the runaway guy for this. He's been doing so well. You know, you throw Sam Darnold and the undefeated Vikings into that conversation. Baker's been playing great football this year. Well, Josh Allen has struggled, to say the least, these last 2 weeks. Sam Darnold, Vikings are undefeated. Hey, got to give him credit, but he did put up kind of a stinker in London on Sunday. Baker's playing great still. You know, no qualms about Baker. Is Lamar about to win his 3rd MVP?
It was looking like it. I mean, I was on the fence with it after week 4, but man, that week 5 showing was fantastic. A case can be made for Joe Burrow. I mean, he'll probably be the first quarterback with a stinker of a record to win it, but he's playing lights out as well. I think if there's one quarterback I would probably put above him as far as how well he's played, I'd say probably Joe Burrow, but man, Lamar Jackson is doing Lamar Jackson things, and he's doing it in a big way. It's a shame that week 5 contest wasn't on prime time, so everyone could see how much of a total dog he was on the field. He was definitely by far the best player on the field on Sunday, but man, I don't see how you can say anyone else. Maybe Sam Darnold, but to your point, he hasn't really played as well in that London game, and Baker Mayfield still probably has a little more to go as far as winning in primetime moments, big moments, to maybe get that nod. So if I'm a voter and I'm looking at maybe who's preliminary could be that guy, Lamar Jackson has to be on the top of your list.
Man, if you are Hard Knocks, you are loving that. Because the AFC Hard Knocks in season, you would love a down to the wire Lamar Jackson versus Joe Burrow for MVP. And I would be curious, though, because you mentioned the record of Cincinnati, if they kind of continue to falter with their defense, what's kind of that record threshold for if a player is going to win that award or not? I know there's conversations about that throughout all of the sports, but for football in particular, it's like, well, if Lamar ends up leading this Ravens team to, well, I don't know, a 13-4 record, let's just say that for the sake of it, and Joe Burrow's Bengals are like 9-8 or something, and it's pretty close. Like, obviously, I think you give the nod to the guy that has the better record. But if it's so far Joe Burrow and then Lamar is kind of like, oh, he had a great season, but then you look at the record, I don't know how they play that. So that's something that would be really curious to think about. But man, our last 2 game previews, and honestly, all the game previews we've done this season, Sam, pretty on point. I would say pretty on point, especially these last 2 weeks where you have come on this show and called it both times. You know, maybe last week, not as many points, right, as you said earlier, but this Washington game, this Washington run defense scares me for that. Not for the Ravens, it scares me for the Commanders because they are second to last in yards per attempt given up this year. I don't know, all the other metrics that surround that run defense are also pretty poor, bottom 5 or even last in the league. Again, it's kind of the metrics of what we were talking about with Cincinnati, where it's like just run the ball early, establish your dominance, and even if they stop it to an extent, you can work play action off of it and just get Lamar going. Offensively for Washington, it's going to be a bit of a challenge to stop Jayden Daniels, but you have to make him as uncomfortable as possible. How do you feel like Baltimore matches up with Washington this week?
I feel very confident. I feel more confident for this contest than I did about the Bengals. I just think that the defense, as you mentioned, the run defense for the Washington Commanders is poor. I mean, in some regards, maybe even poorer than the Bills and the Cowboys. They run a light box almost 70% of the time, which is astronomical considering where the others are at. They're good for 3rd in the league as far as the rate in which they don't keep 8 guys in the box, which is what you need to do against the Ravens. And if you don't have that tendency, if you don't have the wherewithal to do that on a regular basis, it's very hard to flip that switch. Oh, not to mention the Ravens defeat NFC opponents all the time. In fact, Lamar Jackson has only lost to 1 NFC opponent. And the reason for that is primarily because teams do not know how to prepare for Lamar Jackson. And even when you do know how to prepare, a la the Bengals, who see him twice a year, you might still not be able to stop him. So I just don't think that the run defense of the Commanders are going to be up to snuff to stop this offense. And on the defensive side, we talked about it. How do the Ravens match up? It kind of reminds me of the Bills game. I mean, the Commanders do have Scary Terry, who's a dynamic wide receiver. But other than that, there really aren't too many weapons on the Commanders that strike fear in the hearts of defensive coordinators. So I don't expect the Ravens to play as back as they did against the Bengals. They're not going to have that bend but don't break mentality. They're going to be attacking these receivers at the line of scrimmage. You're going to see a lot more bump and run, a lot more blitzing from the DBs. You're going to see a lot of that. So I don't expect it to be that type of game as it was against the Bengals. Obviously, Jayden Daniels is a phenomenal quarterback, especially early on in his career. But there are things that I see in this game that leads me to believe, unless the Ravens falter completely like they did against the Raiders in week 2, I do not expect this to be the type of contest where both teams are putting up 38 points. I think it's a possibility that the Ravens put up 30, but I just don't see it happening on the Washington side. So I think the Ravens match up very well against the Commanders, and it's at M&T Bank Stadium. Tough sledding for the Washington Commanders.
Yeah, speaking of the defensive side of the ball, as you alluded to earlier in the show, Sam, the Ravens did make a little change, a little addition to their coaching staff. Dean Pease, who is very well known in the Baltimore area, obviously won a Super Bowl, is Baltimore's defensive coordinator, spent 6 years with the team. He is back in a senior advisor type of role to Zach Orr, who obviously is only 5 games into his career as a defensive coordinator and as a play caller here. Pretty mixed reactions, I would say, from everybody, Sam, on this, especially on social media. There is certainly the group that believes that this is a great thing. You know, Zach Orr is able to kind of take a step back and say, hey, you know what? There are some things maybe that I don't know. And it would be awesome to have an advisor like a Dean Pease in his ear. And I think that that's certainly where I am. There's another side of it where it's like, oh, well, Zach Orr admitting he's not ready, or the Ravens admitting Zach Orr is not ready. And do they need someone in there like a Dean Pease to kind of guide him? And is that a bad sign? I think it's the good versus the bad. Where do you kind of land on that scale?
I'm in the former. I think this should have happened before the season even started. I mean, you got a young guy, 32 years old. We talked about it before the season, you and I. He's never called plays. He's never called plays in high school, college. And to do that, your first game in the National Football League against the Andy Reid-led Kansas City Chiefs, you're asking for struggles, and the Ravens now know that they have a team that could potentially put up points and win a championship against anybody. I mean, the points speak for themselves. The yardage is speaking for themselves too. So you don't want this defense to be the reason why you falter, especially because they have so much talent. Bring in Dean Pease, a guy who's won a championship with your program. He can help you out. He coached you. I mean, all this stuff. I mean, you know the guy very well. He mentioned that he's a Raven, so I see no problems with this. This is only could be viewed as a positive, maybe having a landing air doing passing situation, passing downs, or just overall opinion, another opinion in the locker room. Just to have that guy there, it's just invaluable. Nothing negative can come from this. I think it's very positive for the Ravens, and I'm glad they did it. It shows, yes, that Zach Orr needs some help, but he obviously will need some help. He's not coming out of being a player, he wasn't known as a special guru, X's and O's guy. I'm sure he knows his stuff, but like Rex Ryan mentioned on ESPN, he's reading from a script. He's reading from the Mike McDonald defense and all the other defense coordinators that have come before him. This isn't potentially his defense through and through. So I think that having a guy teach him special situations, circumstances, give him a feel for the game, positive. I think you're going to see immediate results from this. I think it's a great move by the Ravens, and I'm all for it.
Yeah, and look, I think the big thing for me is, like, would you rather have Zach Orr just like flounder and like flap around in the water, or would you rather have a lifeboat be thrown at him with Dean Pease and help him? Right? I mean, it's clear that there have been some learning curves. You and I and everybody expected that. It would have been crazy if he came out here and this defense was giving up 10 points a game like the 2000 Ravens, and we were just like, whoa, where'd this come from? That was never going to happen. So if maybe this could even accelerate the process of Zach Orr. You have a guy, and this is not the first time we've talked about some level of a senior advisor. Jerry Rosburg almost came into this team in the offseason to help out with John Harbaugh's game management, which I'm sure a lot of people are like, man, they could maybe use that right now. But at the end of the day, this to me is a totally fine move. I'm all on board for it with the Ravens and Zach Orr being very open and accepting to this. I mean, I think it's great. Now, before we get into the keys, players to watch, all that for the Commanders, Sam, you and I have been monitoring this Davante Adams situation closely, and it seems like maybe the final chapter for the Ravens has officially been written. We didn't have a chance, you and I, to talk about the Edgar Allan Poe posts from Davante Adams that happened the day after we recorded. But that, I mean, I have not seen social media, particularly Ravens social media, thrown into a frenzy quite like that in a while. Because again, it's like Edgar Allan Poe, man. Who else are you associating with Edgar Allan Poe? What other city are you associating with Edgar Allan Poe? So that was one thing. But then you have the Athletic reporting that there hasn't been a lot of feelers out on, okay, the Ravens actually going to go for him or they not. But then the big report came on Wednesday when apparently the Ravens are now just officially out on him altogether. And that report actually listed a couple of teams. So Sean Reed of the Athletic saying the Chiefs, the Cowboys, the Ravens, the Commanders all out. Teams still in, the Jets, the Saints, Steelers, and the Bills. Now there are conversations. Davante Adams might not even get traded at this point. This has been a roller coaster, Sam, but kind of like we talked about last week, never felt realistic from the start. And these reports are kind of signaling that, yeah, probably not going to happen.
Yeah, the asking price was probably a little bit too high, and the Raiders, from what I understand, are very unwilling to help pay for some of that contract that would lead a team to potentially trade for Davante Adams. So I'm not surprised that the Ravens are no longer in it, especially after putting up 41 points. I mean, that shows you that this offense is just fine. And I saw a lot of things on film, and I mentioned it on social media, where if you're a receiver in this team, you better know how to block. I mean, Tylan Wallace is a guy who I think might be getting some playing time in the near future because he has just been phenomenal as a blocker. Some whiffs here and there, but he's a receiver. You don't expect him to always connect with a linebacker. He's no Hines Ward, but I don't see Davante Adams being a guy who's going in and whamming a linebacker and setting off Derrick Henry. He's not that type of receiver. So the Ravens will be a little foolish to make a trade for him, especially given the cap space and what that could potentially mean for future signings. So I'm not surprised by this at all. It would have been nice to have a Davante Adams. Can you imagine this offense already putting up 41 points with the Davante Adams? That's almost cheating, even though it is cheating to have Derrick Henry on this offense that we're all seeing right now. So not very surprised by the fact that Davante Adams not here, but to your point, I don't think he's going to get traded. I think some of these wounds are going to be mended a little bit. I think I saw something to the effect of Antonio Pierce talking about having him when he's healthy. So this might be all faltering through, especially because the Raiders are probably realizing they're not getting what they expect for a guy the caliber of Davante Adams. It is what it is. The Ravens will keep Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman and company, and I think they'll be just fine.
Yep, I think they will be too. No Davante Adams does not mean no Super Bowl for this Ravens team. Exactly. They are more than capable of winning it without him. And you're right. I think, they put up 41 points, and all the questions on social media was, hey, man, can he play single high? Can he cover? that's what they, they're saying, well, we don't need a wide receiver right now. If you're the Ravens, you need maybe someone in that secondary or someone on that defense is where people, maybe they go after a Cortland Sutton or DeAndre Hopkins or one of those lesser wide receivers, but price in terms of draft capital as well as the actual compensation always kind of made that unrealistic. But I'm glad you mentioned Tylan Wallace, Sam. You read my mind. 3 players to watch. I have Justice Hill, who again has just been the Swiss Army knife for this Ravens team. You see Derrick Henry on the sideline in the fourth quarter of that Bengals game because Justice Hill's getting the pass work and making guys miss. But Tylan Wallace, couple of huge blocks, couple of huge receptions in this game, super physical player that's fighting for extra yards out there. And then Daniel Faalele, who has played better over these last couple of weeks. I mean, it's the improvement of a young player. And I'm very curious to see if again, the Commanders do have some good players on that defensive line, Jonathan Allen being the main one. But to me, those are the guys that I am watching. Sam, do you have anybody else you want to keep an eye on?
Man, I would love to see Marcus Williams bounce back because he had a pretty poor game last week. I'm sure that's going to eat on his conscience to get out there as soon as possible and make amends. So the talent's still there for Marcus Williams. I think he just needs to put it together. And to the point about having a guy like Dean Pease come in, the defense is not completely on Zach Roy. The players have not been able to play up to the statements that they've done in the past. So definitely not on Zach Roy. So I expect these Ravens players to improve, and I would love to see Marcus Williams be that guy, as I'm sure the Jayden Daniels Washington Commanders will take shots deep down the field. So I expect perhaps a big game upcoming for Marcus Williams. And to your point, Daniel Faalele, that defensive front is not messing around. So I like to see how he plays with the potentially dominant defensive front in the Washington Commanders, see what they do, because I think the Commanders will test them early. They won't play 8 guys in the box, I don't think right away. I think they'll see what Daniel Faalele and Patrick McCarry have, those interior guards. So I'm very interested to see how those two guards play as well.
Yep, and we saw some Ravens return to practice, by the way, on Thursday. Rashad Bateman, Marlon Humphrey, etc., Ronnie Stanley. So only 3 that didn't practice, if I'm remembering right. It's Salah, it's Malik Harrison, and Arthur Millette, I believe, were the 3. Anybody else, I believe, was at least limited fashion there. So we'll see how that plays out on Friday. Sam, keys to victory here for me. We've talked about him. Make Jayden Daniels panic. Don't let him get comfortable. Don't let him slice and dice that defense. Show him things he hasn't seen before. If you're Roquan Smith and you're saying that, show Jayden Daniels things that he has never seen before. Don't give up big plays. We've seen Jayden Daniels and Scary Terry McLaurin hit on some of those deep shots lately. We know the Ravens don't like to give up big plays. We know they play in formations where you don't give up big plays very often, although, hey, a lot of big plays against Cincinnati last week for that Bengals offense. And then finally, dominate on the ground, both offensively and defensively. Establish that early so that Commanders have to worry about it. Take away that aspect from the Commanders so that the Ravens defense doesn't have to worry about it. Those are where I am going there. Is there anything else that you have your eye on as you want to look at for the keys of the game?
I would love for the Ravens to get ahead early. I mean, get a 10-point lead early, get the crowd on your side. It's a 1 p.m. start. It's not going to be a prime time. So getting these guys going early, give Jayden Daniels difficulty hearing what the players are coming from the head coach. So doing that, getting that early lead will do wonders for this team, I believe, on both sides of the ball. So other than that, those other keys to victory are perfect as usual by you, Kev. So I think that the Ravens need to implement that as well as get ahead early and get this out of the way early. Get it done.
Yeah. Again, 10-point lead. That to me, and again, no lead is safe with this Ravens team. I think that's already been established, but it's better to not have to come from behind like you did against the Bengals. Not that they can't do it. Obviously, we have seen them do it countless times. You want to be able to get out to a lead, not have to worry about it, although I think anybody's going to be worrying regardless. You said, 4 touchdowns is where you'd not be worried for this team. So maybe a little worry if it's a 3-touchdown lead, but get out to the lead just so you have it. Final score prediction for me, Sam. I am going Ravens over 30 points. I have them at 31 in this game. Got to give the Commanders credit. This offense is good, but I do expect Jayden Daniels to struggle against this defense. I think the domination against rookie quarterbacks continue. I think Lamar Jackson moves to 22-1 against the NFC. How do you have this one playing out?
I had it at 31-17, so we're very close. Yeah, I'm going to be different. I'm going to push it back a little bit. I'll say 34-20 to make the score a little bit better. But 31-18 is not bad. That's very close to what I had.
Yeah, I always feel like whenever I do final score predictions, I'm very tight with the scores. I'm like, 21-14 or 14-7, obvious. I'm like, no, I need to throw a weird number in there. Give me 18, 31, because it always ends up being that way for some reason. So that's what I have there. But Sam, appreciate you as always as well. Be sure to tell the people where to find you and what you're working on.
All right, you can find me on YouTube at Ravens Talk Podcast. You can also find me on social media at Ravens Talk Podcast, on Instagram. I'm also on Twitter X at Ravens Talk Pod. New episode just released today, so go on YouTube and check it out. Also can find me on Apple and Spotify.
The links to Sam's work in the description down below. Be sure to check it out. Subscribe to his YouTube channel. Follow him on Twitter, Instagram, wherever you can find his work because he does some really great work. Sam, appreciate you again. And thank you to everybody for tuning into Locked On Ravens today. We'll see again where the headlines take us. And whenever I say that, there always is a headline. So maybe a bonus episode tomorrow, maybe not. But if not, we'll, of course, be back Sunday morning for our pre-game edition episode ahead of Washington, Baltimore. So be sure to stay tuned. We'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.